Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian talk show, and sometimes we're talking about Russia and China, but lately also Israel, because you cannot ignore magnitude of situation that's happening there, and it seriously affects Ukrainian situation too. My name is Sasha Starr, and today we have guests. First of all, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here.
And we have founder of the network, Nick Paliveda. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Yeah, at least it's not a food fight over here, Sasha.
Yeah. Okay. You may have someone else. Nick, let me know if you see
I
somebody
will. I
else.
will. Someone comes in.
Okay. Ivan just put a short note that he will not be able to join today, but he promised to be on Friday. Okay, so hopefully he's doing okay because he's in Kiev, right where the situation in Ukraine happening. So in Ukraine, it's now on a deep background of at least U.S. The media, thanks to situation with Israel, which is very dynamic, and the situation is changing almost by an hour, sometimes even by a minute. So the latest now is that there will be an exchange of the prisoners. Let's call them prisoners. I don't know how well hostages. Okay, on one side there are hostages, on the other side there are prisoners. So it's exchange X amount of we don't know even how many hostages by same amount times 3 of prisoners. That's better situation than it was with Israeli private several years ago, Gilad, who was exchanged for 1,200 prisoners. Okay, so now all of a sudden from 1,200 for one, now it's coming down back to 3 to 1. So
Yeah, the exchange rate has definitely dropped.
there must be something with exchange rate. I haven't looked the market yet today, but there must be something with the exchange rate. And if they could do 3 for 1, nobody tried 2 for 1 maybe, or they said
One special. Yeah, Sasha, I'm not sure if it makes that much difference because it's not so much different the prisoner exchange. It's what the prisoner committed. Because some of the people, well, I'm in prison because I, was smoking marijuana or whatever they were doing in Israel that was maybe a minor crime
Right.
in Israel, and they may be held there. So when I heard it was like two for one was the exchange, you go, oh, Israel's getting a bad deal. Well, maybe not, because some of the people are in prison for minor offenses, literally, or they hit their neighbor, okay, and so they're in jail, and they were Palestinian, or a Palestinian hit a Israeli, and they're in jail for 3 years or something like that. So I don't think the numbers matter as much as people think they do when they do exchanges like this. Not only that is, look, we have a lot of prisoners in the United States, and some of them committed really bad crimes. If Hamas wants to exchange prisoners, we'll be glad to send our murderers over them, let them house them or figure out.
Let them deal with them.
Exactly, and if they get 2 for 1, they get 2 American murders for 1 hostage. I'd do that every day. See what I mean? So I did see the numbers, but the numbers don't mean anything.
Wouldn't you try to do 7 for 1?
Yeah, right. Matter of fact, yeah, I'd give them 7 to 1. I'd give them all the prisoners. Here, you can have them. Remember, they did that because really, when you're housing a prisoner in the United States, it's an expensive proposition. It costs about $40,000 to $50,000 a year to house a prisoner in the United States. If somebody wants them and the exchange rate is high and in their favor, hey, Lord, they'll love the U.S. when you exchange them and put them in a Palestinian jail. Seriously.
You know that there will be a lot of spaces now in Russian jails because while the war in Ukraine is going on, they're sending the significant proportion of their jail population to the front lines.
Oh, yeah, right. And then
So
they're getting slaughtered.
there will be a lot of spaces available in Russian jail. So if America will have problem with their jail systems, they can always outsource it to Russia and send some of some of the prisoners.
And you know, Sasha, I don't think that the media reports well enough how many people don't want this war in Ukraine. There's actually a lot of deserters in Ukraine who are going to Moldova because they don't want to be drafted and become part of a Russian food fight feast. Same with Russians; they're deserting to Finland because they don't want to join the Russian army.
Not anymore.
And Norway is getting ready to close its border with Russia. Even though
with
it's
Russia.
near the border.
Yeah, because John, the fact is, other than a small group of people, a lot of people, they're not interested in a big food fight. They're not interested in a big war. They're not interested in Putin trying to push his agenda onto the Ukraine. And the people in Ukraine don't want to get slaughtered by the Russians. The Russians don't want to get slaughtered by the Ukrainians. So you're seeing a lot of deserters. When the bad thing that Russia does is they shut the media down. Okay, so this way there's no protest. In other words, like if you're against the war in Russia, you'll find your next step is in the gulag. And that's really bad because it's not necessarily that the Russians, and the educated Russians, by the way, are leaving Russia. They're going and if I was an educated Russian and I had a way out, and I was young because they're going to take me into the draft, I would be looking to get out. I don't want to. I can see it. Why would they want to fight in Ukraine? Tell me why one good Russian in the world wants to fight in Ukraine. Talk to me. Other than Putin, he likes to fight. But Putin's not on the front lines. He's sitting back in Moscow. Get his butt on the front lines and see how well he likes it, little punk.
Actually, it's the greatest difference between Russia force, where everybody is trying to escape. Well, it used to be Finland, now they're going to escape to Mongolia, maybe some other friendly countries. But if you take, and of course, all the children of the people in government or close to that, they're all defected from their obligation to go on front, and they're hiding or they're being officially released from their duties. In Israel, it's a very different situation. I had a list of children from the top generals to almost all governmental figures, by the way, including the Arab members of Knesset, the Israeli government. They're all on front lines. They're all fighting.
Yeah.
All without any exception.
Right.
That shows a difference.
Yeah, it is different. And my expectation is that Israel will take over the Gaza Strip. It'll become part of Israel. Period. The end. Too many bombs just coming from Israel. Too much hate being generated. Too much intergenerational hate. And Sasha, I think they're tired of it. So they'll just annex the Gaza Strip, and I think they should. And end it. And then the thing is, there won't be any of this. Oh, missiles are coming from Gaza, because they'll put that down pretty quick. So Gaza asked for them to be annexed, the way I'll look at it, because October 7th attack was saying, we want you. Okay. The IDF is much stronger than any military than anything they have in Gaza. And so they're just going to take over the Gaza Strip and keep it. And in the meantime, the international community is going to jump up and down. Palestine should have their separate state, all this other garbage. I don't think so. They lost their right to their second state on October 7th. So they're going to have to earn, having a country is a privilege, not a right. They've lost that privilege. Let's put it that way. So they have to earn the privilege back. It's just like if you're going to be part of the European Union, it's a privilege. It's not a right. Same with being a member of NATO. So you have to earn it, and you're not going to do it because you're squawking. I want my separate country. Too bad. So sad. Too bad. You have to earn it.
Nick, you see, the problem with two-state solution is, which became amplified hugely on October 7th, is that how you can have two states when one state, their only goal is a destruction of the other state.
You can't.
So,
You can't, Sasha.
how you can do it?
I'm
Those
sorry,
are
you can't.
politically irreconcilable objectives. Once you cannot have a two-state solution when one state desires that the other state cease to exist. It just will
Right.
not happen. So
Right, yeah.
that takes care of that. As far as
Yeah.
the Russia-Ukraine problem, the only thing that is sustaining Russia's war in Ukraine, realistically, it's not the support of the Russian people that's sustaining that conflict. It is an autocratic Russian government that, led by Putin, who is essentially bent on getting as much leverage out of his perceived nuclear superiority, his nuclear arsenal. That is his main means of leverage, that he believes gives him political cover and freedom of action to wage war against Ukraine and potentially reestablish the Russian Empire. And as I have stated before on this program, the logical solution, NATO and the US already have part of the solution in their hands. Since their deployment of Patriot to the Ukrainian theater, the Patriot has a near 100% interception rate of Russia's ballistic missiles. They have the foundation for a nearly impenetrable ballistic missile defense. And the final step that needs to be taken is that at the conclusion of this war, if not before, that the US and NATO should begin to construct an effective global ballistic missile defense, which will be capable of neutralizing the one factor, the one thing that the Russians believe make them a great power, their nuclear missile arsenal. Once that is done, they are effectively neutered, powerless, and so they become irrelevant. And the press at large does not acknowledge this, or probably is not even aware of it. But what is the real center of gravity here is that the Russian nuclear arsenal giving the Russians cover to conduct their operations. They do not have military, technological, or industrial superiority over the Ukraine and the West. What they do have is they have the political will to keep on going. How do you deprive them of that political will? You neutralize their main means of leverage, which in this case, as they have implied repeatedly with their threats, using their nuclear missile arsenal. The key here is neutralize it and take steps to make sure that neutralization is permanent. So right now, as far as the conflict itself goes at the operational level, you have two crucial points which Ukraine has within its ability to affect: the Russian Black Sea Fleet, driving it out of the Black Sea, causing the Russians to lose control of the Black Sea, and at the same time, neutralizing or severing the logistical and reinforcement link between Russia and Crimea. Once that is accomplished, then the Ukrainians can commit their strategic reserves into an offensive into Crimea, which will effectively force the surrender of Russian occupation forces in Crimea. Once that is accomplished, the Ukraine will have succeeded in inflicting a major operational defeat upon Russia. It will be unmistakable. The Russians won't be able to explain it away. They cannot excuse it. They will be forced or compelled to accept an armistice, a ceasefire. It can't be a permanent treaty simply because Russia is unwilling to negotiate a genuine treaty which recognizes the existence of Ukraine. Russia denies the existence of Ukraine. So long as that situation exists, there is no possibility of a negotiated peace between Russia and Ukraine. It must be won by Ukraine. And for doing so, they have to achieve an operational victory in either one, preferably both areas, the Black Sea and severing the link between Russia and Crimea.
Yes, Jonathan, there has to be some kind of action from Ukrainians to compel Russians to agree to whether it's a ceasefire or just any other stoppage of atrocities, because right now Putin has no incentives whatsoever to negotiate anything. This present state of affair, where it's a positional war, which could go on for next 5 years or if not longer, that's exactly what he loves. Look at this, all the frozen conflicts in Tiraspol near Moldova area, which is 30 years old. already more than 30 years. And look at the Abkhazia, which was part of Georgia, and look at the Donbass and region of Ukraine and so on. And we can go on and on and on. That's where Russian started different type of conflicts here and there. And then they would never agree to any resolution of this conflict. They wanted just to keep it going, and that's their modus operation. So if they will do the same thing with Ukraine, there will be no peace, no war, there will be more of the same for next several years. And what do you think, Jonathan, how to avoid this?
How to avoid this is that again, time is not on Ukraine's side in that sense. So the imperative lies with Ukraine, and to a similar extent to the U.S. and its NATO allies, to give Ukraine sufficient means to compel that operational defeat of the Russian army, and those two theaters. And once victory is achieved in Crimea and the Black Sea, then Ukraine will be able to pivot and direct its reserves towards continuing to drive the Russians out of the rest of Ukraine. The first thing that has to occur is it must defeat Russia in detail. It must defeat and retake the Crimea. That is the imperative for Ukraine, and that is its chief goal. And I believe, based on my observations and analysis, that Ukraine is closer to achieving this objective than either Russia or Western observers are willing to accept or admit.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what's interesting is that Russia is proving actually that they're essentially okay. Let's not talk it. It's a criminal state. It's economically and so on developed state, but because of this centralized system with Putin on the very top, and everybody is holding the line, and there is no protest. I'm talking about meaningful protest that could affect the decision making in Russia. They show that at least in the wartime, their system is superior to the Western democratic system, which is subject to constant changes in its direction because of any, say, this new war with Israel affected. Say coming elections or coming local elections and federal and state elections and millions of other things. So West seems to me, cannot concentrate on one thing for a long period of time. So say 3 months, 6 months probably would be okay. But years, 5 years?
Well,
No.
the Western democracies reached the limit of their capability, as we have observed during World War II. Is a perfect example of this. I mean, the United States and Great Britain, they were able to sustain a war effort against Nazi Germany and Japan, but they were approaching the limits of their endurance. But they managed to defeat Nazi Germany and then turn, and the conclusion of World War II was made possible by the development and use of the atomic bomb, as we know, because otherwise the United States would have been confronted by having to execute Operations Olympic and Coronet, the invasion of the Japanese home islands, which would have cost an estimated 1 million U.S. casualties. And that would have been absolutely prohibitive. And the American people were at the very limit of their willingness to support that kind of war. That's what the Japanese were counting on. They were hoping to drag out the war and make the cost too high for Americans to take. And fortunately for us, our development and use of the atomic bomb spared us from having to pay that heavy a price. Now, in this case, in the current situation, neither Ukraine nor Russia can really sustain a long war of the duration approaching World War II. And not even the Korean War, which had a duration of about 3 years. I do not believe that the war will be continuing at the current level in 3 years. I mean, I would be greatly surprised if it did. What is imperative, however, is that Ukraine realizes this. The Ukrainian people realize it. The Ukrainian leadership knows it. In the Ukrainian military, they know that it is not in their interest to engage in a prolonged war of attrition, and that they're therefore trying to convince their Western allies as we need to finish them. We need to finish the Russians, knock them out of our country, and make sure that our post-war military posture and deterrence posture is such that the Russians will not think of reinitiating hostilities for years, if not decades, to come. That it should be the real objective.
But I think the deterrence of Russia is not a goal of the US and some other European members of G7, NATO. I think the plan is to exhaust Russia considerably without risking nuclear war, but just kept them at bay. And Ukraine, as long as Ukraine is willing and able to defend itself, let them do it for years, 5 years and 10 years, even better.
Well, by the way, Sasha, that objective could in fact be achieved in parallel with what I have been recommending, that the U.S. and NATO begin taking steps to create that global ballistic missile defense system that would neutralize the main lever of Russian power. And it can do so by upgrading by not only bolstering the theater ballistic missile defenses of Ukraine, but also create the base for a global ballistic missile defense system through the upgrading of the U.S. Space Force. And when I say upgrading the U.S. Space Force, I mean take the U.S. Space Force beyond what President Trump had initially made it, which was simply calling our existing set of 80 satellites a Space Force. Well, that doesn't work. The Russians and the Chinese do not see a Space Force when they look at what we call the U.S. Space Force. What they see are a set of 80 targets, 80 satellites, which they can attempt to neutralize with their counter space weapons. And so in order to negate that move, you need an asymmetric response. You need to establish a space fleet that is in orbit, manned by U.S. Space Force personnel, and which is equipped with laser weapons capable of conducting boost phase ballistic missile defense, thereby neutralizing the nuclear arsenals of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, for that matter, all at once. Therefore, once you have established that, you have established strategic stability in space. Because if you put, for example, satellite observational capabilities on U.S. Space Force starships, you have created strategic stability. Because if you're just looking at unmanned satellites, destroying an unmanned satellite, okay, satellites don't have mothers. There are no people involved. However, if you have U.S. Space Force personnel manning starships equipped with similar observational capability, if you attack a starship in Earth orbit, that is an act of war, a clear act of war. And therefore, you have therefore a much firmer basis for strategic stability in space, as well as for neutralizing the nuclear arsenals of our opponents.
Well, with probable enormous cost of creating such a system,
cheaper than you think, less expensive than you think. If you were to try to create such a global space force from scratch with completely new design ships, that would be indeed expensive. However, if the Pentagon were to, in fact, to say to Elon Musk, Elon, we'd like to buy 12 of your Falcon 9s, 12 of your Falcon Heavies, and 12 of your starships, especially once you get the bugs out of it so it stops blowing up on its way up into orbit. You get those perfected, you have the essential core of a space fleet, because those ships, interestingly enough, work very well in being able to support each other in Earth orbit. And if you have operational starships that are capable with their cargo capacity of about 100 tons, it's estimated that ostensibly the Starship, for example, is supposed to be able to carry 100 colonists to Mars for a Martian colony. Well, people who have been looking at that rather closely say, no, that's not really a viable, a chemically powered Starship taking 6 to 7 months to get to Mars. That's not really sustainable. They say that the Starship that Elon Musk currently has is really capable of supporting about 10 people as a crew for a long period of time. And if you have that Starship in Earth orbit, where it can be resupplied and reinforced by Falcon Heavies and Falcon 9s, now you've got something. You've got a viable Space Force that can operate in Earth orbit and on the moon. And it can accomplish several strategic missions, which the United States could execute on behalf of itself, its own national interest, as well as for planetary defense. So that is the example of an asymmetric response, not building more nuclear weapons. Build a system which can neutralize nuclear weapons. That is the true answer, not simply copying what the other side does.
Oh, well, Nick, what do you think with this present commitment to Pentagon's budget of 800 some billions of dollars, say close to $1 trillion, is there any amount significant enough that could be allocated to this project?
Yeah, I think we do have the money available for a project like that. And frankly, Sasha, if you look at it, that is the next project, is to build a deterrence using space, similar to what they did with the Patriot missiles interceptors. We need to do the same thing that can intercept anything that comes from Russia or China. I know we keep harping on Russia. I think Russia is kind of a third world dog. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure, but China is not. China has the economic power to actually, and the intellectual power to actually put together some very serious hypersonic weapons, and we need to defend ourselves. So against
and
Russia.
Right now, Nick, about the most cost-effective way that you're going to do that is you're going to need to have a system that can intercept in the boost phase, intercept them while they are on their way up. You don't want them with the ability to maneuver.
Right, but we have the technology, we have the budget, but we have to use our money efficiently. See, the real problem with a lot of the military budget, and John would know more, a lot of it is inefficient. It's kind of we're throwing money on
more. It operates more on the principle of more of everything is better.
Exactly.
That was pretty much how the U.S. defense budget was operating when we had the strategy during the 1960s, the strategy of flexible response. We were trying to respond to the Soviet threat at all levels.
Yes.
And so and that just meant more of everything is better.
Yeah, use your $800 billion effectively, okay? Right. Because right now we're not in any wars. Yes, we're supporting Israel and Ukraine, but right now the United States is not involved in any wars. We have tons of bases all over the world, but do we have an efficient system to deter a nuclear attack? And I don't think so. And I think what we need to do is focus in on that and get her done. Realize most people in Europe and in the West do not want to be part of the Putin-Xi regime. If they were, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania would all say, hey, welcome in. You know, we want to join Russia, not NATO. And Ukraine, why didn't they want to join Russia? Because for whatever reason, Sasha, people don't like to be part of a corrupt, repressive regimes. So let's spend the money, we've got it, wisely to put together a space deterrent force and use our money for that rather than, I know we like to build tanks and ships, but come on, you know, I would rather.
Yeah, I might expand on your recommendation there, Nick. In that space deterrent force would you would need to use a stronger term. It would be the U.S. Space Force would in effect be the centerpiece of a space control force.
Yeah.
Much the same way that the U.S. Navy is not a sea deterrent force. It is a sea control force. I mean, the U.S. Navy is stronger than all the other navies in the world combined. So, and that is what has guaranteed strategic stability ever since World War II.
Yeah, and I know that's impressive. The Navy's impressive, but to me, more impressive would be we've built a deterrent system or a system that knocks out missiles as they come in.
Yeah.
Than having another, naval ship. I mean, to me in the Navy, I guess it's useful for.
That is going to be an interest. That is Nick. That is going to be an interesting challenge for the next Secretary of Defense in achieving what I call achieving. The U.S. should not be, for the remainder of the 21st century, the United States should not strive to be the world's hegemon or global policeman. Rather,
Correct.
it should be the global geopolitical balancer. We
Right.
maintain stability, and that requires less of certain kinds of military power
That's right.
than others.
I'm with you, John. I hate to say it. The thing is, these
You hate to say that you're with me.
these aircraft carriers are really expensive.
Oh
They're
no,
floating
yeah.
islands, but frankly, it's old technology. It's World War II stuff. If you said I have a hypersonic missile that destroys other missiles on their way up, I'm good with spending money on that rather than billions on another aircraft carrier or some battleship. Who sunk my battleship? Who cares? That's World War II. We got to worry about World War III, which will not be fought on a bloody battleship in Iwo Jima.
I would like to actually ask you not underestimate the older weapons. That's exactly what Russia demonstrates in Ukraine. They're using weapons from the 50s and 60s because they have difficulties to produce modern weapons, and nobody expected that this war would demand such a high level of conventional weapons that no country in the world can produce enough. Except Russia, they're producing very, very old, like 50s or 60s, the systems, the tanks, the artillery, the whatever it is. And you know what? It still can kill people. These old systems, they are, first of all, very inexpensive. You can produce them in tens, hundreds of thousands a month. And they still can kill. They're not precise. So if instead of, let's say, you want to target something, you instead of shooting one ATACMS missile, you have to shoot probably 100 of these 50, 60 missiles, but you will get this target anyway, at higher cost. But who cares? Russians don't care about cost. They can throw in some few more. Actually, I noticed in Ukrainian Pravda, the source, it's a Ukrainian, but they're quite precise how many people are being killed every day on the front lines. Now, there is seldom a day when at least 1,000 Russian soldiers would be killed and so many tanks destroyed and so on. So Russians, they do have heavy losses. I think it's a result of their Avdiivka attacks, which reminds loosely a Bakhmut situation where they didn't count the cost. They don't care how many people will die there today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, next week or next month. They just don't care. They don't even count. It's the only country that when Second World War ended in 45, today's 23, almost 24. Russians don't know how many people exactly they lost in Second World War. They just don't know. At one point it was 20 million, 15 million, now it's 27 million. They don't know and they don't care. That's a horrible truth.
Yeah. Sasha, this reminds me of a rather grim joke that circulated among the Chinese when they were engaged in war with Japan during the Second World War. And the first Chinese says to the second, says, we lost 10,000 men in our battle, today's battle against the Japanese. He said, how many did the Japanese lose? He said 100. Marvelous, says the first Chinese. We'll soon have them on the run.
Yeah, it's really a good one. There are a lot of talks in, I read different blogs about slowly Israel and Ukraine, they're coming to realization with all the political frictions in the last several months and so on. But they're coming to realizations that essentially they are fighting the same enemy. Because if you look at who is behind Hamas attacks, it's Iran. And who is behind Iran? Is Russia. Who is fighting Ukraine? They're fighting Russia, supported by Iran, Iranian drones, and so on. So the same actors against Israel and against Ukraine. So right now they're talking about more cooperation, the military supply, the medicine, especially on the front lines. There are a lot of talks. And also the notion that, remember, the Netanyahu was saying that he has a special relationship with Putin. And that was, it was hardly unbeatable trump for Netanyahu, because who else can claim in a world that has special relationship with Putin? Well, and where is that special relationship today? Netanyahu is history. As soon as all these atrocities will be finished one day or another, he will be gone, and he will have to actually answer for a lot of questions that will be directed at him. And Israel will continue its foreign policy without relying on Russia a great time as it used to be before. Jonathan, what do you think about this?
Well, oh my goodness, we have another one popping in here. But anyway, I would say that, Israel is much more in control of its own destiny than at this point than is Ukraine. Israel has the ability, should it decide to do so, to permanently neutralize the threat from Hamas. It will obviously have to be prepared for any potential backlash on the part of public opinion or political opinion in other countries. But there is really no way that Hamas can effectively retaliate against Israel if Israel decides to assert its right to defend itself and to gain control of the entire complete control of the entire Gaza Strip. It's just negotiating the rather difficult public relations campaign, if you will, that Israel will have to negotiate. They basically have to tell its naysayers and the rest of the world to just stick it.
Jonathan, I'd like to understand that it seems to me that at least for foreseeable future, the idea of two states is gone. It's history. Now, so let's imagine that Israel will control the Gaza by keeping its forces there, one way or another. It will control Gaza. And then what? What do you think will happen next? Let's say a year, say 2 years from now. Where is it going to go?
Well, you are going to have potentially either the Palestinians occupying Hamas, if they are unwilling or unable to stay, Israel may be faced with a massive deportation problem. In other words, sending these people out of Hamas elsewhere. They may have to depopulate, not through killing them all, but simply deporting them all. But they would have to deport them to another country that would be willing to accept them. That would be another major problem. But right now, Israel can achieve a posture where Hamas or the people in the Gaza Strip are incapable of defending themselves or further hostilities against Israel. The problem will then be almost a humanitarian problem. What do you do with all these people who are incapable of resistance but are unwilling to coexist?
But Jonathan, I think the problem is much deeper than that, because in 75 years or so, this Palestinian problem could be easily solved by so many Arab countries, and especially today quite wealthy ones, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and many others. And it seems to me that they never were willing to take on and invite Palestinians. because Palestinians are useful only as some kind of a foreign body on, actually not on, but in Israel. They are part of Israel. And so they could encourage to carry on attacks against Israel, whether it's every year, every month, or even every day. So that will destabilize Israel, and Israel will never be able to peacefully exist or coexist with others. And that's why no Arab countries ever take, they're helping a lot Palestinians, authority both in West Bank and Gaza. They're sending tens of millions, if not billions of dollars. So they're spending their resources to help them, but not to take them, because to take them, they relieve Israel of its threats. And they don't want to do it. Let's keep them there, and okay, we'll supply them with weapons, with money, with just anything. Just stay there. Okay, keep getting. Each woman will get more and more babies. They have women who are producing 10 babies and 12 babies. Hopefully, most of them will become terrorists when they will grow up. And that's a modus operandi. They don't want to change anything. And
Well, in this case, ultimately, if it comes down to it, Israel may be forced, maybe compelled, reluctantly conclude that its only real solution is the imposition of a Carthaginian peace.
yeah,
The Carthaginian peace, such as Rome did to Carthage at the conclusion of the Punic Wars, basically eliminate the opposing entity as an effective organized force or organized anything, eliminate its existence. Just
or
as
look at the when the war was ultimately decided by complete capitulation, like it was Germany in 1945. Has ever Germany attacked any other country since that time?
nope.
Absolutely not. It's technically, militarily, economically, it's just impossible. It just cannot happen. That's period, full stop. So same thing is probably has to be a decision in this case, because you see they've done on, okay, so people say October 7th, so they killed 1,400 Israelis and they took 240, 50 hostages. People don't understand what's happened on October 7th. What's happened on October 7th, if you understand the purpose of creation the state of Israel after Holocaust, they wanted to have their own country which will protect the Jews who are in that country, and potentially all world Jews who will come later on, maybe from Europe, from the United States, or wherever, to protect them, make them feel that this is their home. That notion was destroyed by October 7th, because they could do it on October 7th. Why can't they do it on December 7th, on March 7th, on April 7th, or any other month? They will try, and they're saying it, we will try to repeat it as much as we can, and so on, because the goal of Hamas, and it's not true that Palestinians are not supporting Hamas and they're against Hamas and all that nonsense. It's not true. Absolutely. I can tell you, for example, that if you will look at a new poll by the Arab World for Research and Development, a Palestinian research organization, finds that 75% of Palestinians support the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th. And if you remember, there were a lot of pictures when they brought, for example, 82 years Holocaust survivor, they brought her to the Gaza. What were dancing on the streets, the screaming, the celebrations, the song and dance. It was not Hamas people who celebrated. There were Palestinians. This is a problem with two-state solution. 3-state solution, 7-state solution, that is inherent problem that it will take a generation, if not more, to re-educate these people who believe that Israel is aggressor, oppressor, and all that stuff. So the Israel has to be destroyed and taken to the sea and all that stuff. This is a real truth about the situation. Yeah. In Ukraine, from that point of view, Ukraine situation much simpler.
Yeah.
Ukrainians are a monolithic country. They know what they're fighting for. And in any scenario, there will be more help from the West or less help from the West. I don't see a scenario how Russia can win this war. They can
Well,
continue.
not unless Ukraine is abandoned by all of its allies and left to fight alone. That would be the only scenario under which Russia could hope to wear down Ukraine sufficiently to achieve its. Essentially, what Russia wants is the destruction of Ukraine as a political entity. They do not believe that Ukraine has a right to exist. Pure and simple. That's anyone who's looking at the situation with any degree of objectivity knows that this is a politically irreconcilable situation. And
John,
therefore,
sorry, I wanted to interject that, in my opinion, the far greater threat to Ukraine is not Russian invasion, and it's not the military problems that they have right now because of lack of the help from the West. It's its own destruction from the. You see, Ukrainians have, or at least they're established in the last 30 years, their own kind of a way of life, which is they're not as aggressive as Russia. They're not attacking anybody, right? They found their way with super corruption and several other mechanisms. Most of them are copied from Russia, and most of them, because they're cooperated with Russia for so long, so they've learned from Russian ways how to do it and so on. And it seems to me that West, United States primarily, they don't want to continue to play ball with the idea that, yeah, we understand, okay, you're not perfect country. Okay, you have some corruption here and there. But to defeat Russia, okay, we'll close our eyes on it and we'll continue to help and so on. It seems to me that I don't know why, maybe you know, but I don't. America decided no longer to play a ball with that. So there was a famous letter, I think 4, maybe 5 pages letter, where United States explained what their demand from Ukraine. Some has to be done in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, so on. And a list of, I think there was 13 people who has to be gone right away, next day. Number 1 name in that list was Yermak, who essentially assumed the position of Tsar of Ukraine. There is nothing happens in Ukraine that will not go through Yermak's office, through his approval, or what. And that was an Yermak. I don't know. Don't want to spend any time to explain who Yermak is and what he's done in his previous years before he became such a powerful person. I don't want to do that. You can find it elsewhere. And it seems to me that there is a friction right now. What Zelensky, what choice he's going to make to say to US and the West, and he was trying for the last year, if no longer. Hello, Shaquille. He was trying.
Sorry, the show went over.
He was trying to play it the way that, okay, Ukrainians are spilling their blood. And by doing that, they're defending all West, all civilized world, or so on. So for that, we want West to give us the weapons, finances, and here and there and there. And it worked for some time, close to a year. But the same message repeated over and over and over. And when Americans ask Zelensky, what have you done to fix these problems, to do reforms in your government a month ago, 2 months ago? And the answer is we are working on it. Okay, next month, how it's going? So what you've done so far? Well, we keep working on that. And what have you worked so far? What show you what you've done in the last a week, 10 days, 14 days, 15 days? Show me. Well, we keep working. You know what? It doesn't work anymore this time. So this is a much bigger threat to Ukraine than Russian 50s or 60s tanks that they're producing, and they can't hit anything, and they sometimes people even have difficulties to start them. Okay.
Yeah, well, asking Ukraine to fix its problems with corruption while it is trying to fend off and repel an invasion by Russia, that's similar to asking an airplane mechanic to fix an airplane while the airplane is in flight. It's really a diversion of effort, and that they first help us repel the Russian invaders from our borders and from our interior, and then once we have physical security from invasion from without, then we can afford to turn our attentions to reform of potential perceived corruption from within. But to do both at the same time is counterproductive and distracting, and you're liable to get a satisfactory result in neither area.
But you see, Jonathan, I agree with you, except one thing, that the most part. Okay, I understand the weapons is okay. I don't have any problems with a lot of weapons or not so much weapons, but at least okay, they're coming. They've been used by Ukrainians. Now the problem is just financial help. When you see that the country at war, and the country is fighting its existential war, if you will, and the West is helping financially to support Ukraine while it's fighting. And then you can see that the government officials are driving the latest models, Mercedes and the BMWs, and the money, there is no accountability that the money goes in and that's it. And then you cannot follow the money anymore. Once it's there, oh, well, you got the last month's $15 billion. So where is the $15 billion? Oh, well, we spend it for a little bit here and a little bit there. And that we bought some of this stuff and some of that stuff. And you cannot follow it. Okay, show bank records. Okay, so you deposit this money in this bank. Okay, Ukrainian Bank of Development. Okay, the money come here. Now the money are leaving this bank. It's not that somebody brought a cash, $15 billion. No, it's going through the banking system. So the money is in the bank. Here is a deposit, $15 billion. Then the money are leaving the bank. It's going over here, a little bit over there, and some other stuff. Where's the stuff? Where is the invoice? Why did you pay this money? Well, we had to pay this to cover something here and something there. Who was the recipient of this money? Shakil, you can follow this money transactions or not?
I'm surprised you're a married man, Sasha, for such a long time. It sounds like a woman spending money. You know, what did you do? Where did you spend it? You know, perhaps the Ukrainian government has been following the US's example of spending lots of money and never being answerable for it. Perhaps they thought, well, we could just do the same as America. Why not? Everyone else does. But this is the issue, I think, with this conflict here is we've been told for such a long time that the Ukraine is one of the most corrupt places on earth. And all of a sudden, now it's an issue. Now that they're under attack by Russia, now it's an issue. As Jonathan said, this should have been an issue before. It has somewhat been, but this should have been an issue before. But right now, I think we have to work out what we in the West are going to do and what we're prepared to support with the Ukraine and also with Israel-Palestine. Okay. What are we prepared to accept? Because unfortunately for the Ukraine, they're reliant on the West. What are we prepared to concede to Russia and what are we not prepared to concede? And if we're not prepared to concede certain things, what are we prepared to do in relation to perhaps military conflict with Russia ourselves if they cross certain lines? Same thing with Palestine, Israel. Presumably Israel is going to be successful in crushing Hamas, but the Palestinian-Israel issue is still going to exist. Is the solution the international community has for this? What is the plan? Because it's one thing to throw heaps of money behind something when it gets to these critical points when conflict has actually started, but then when the conflict is over, we all just go away and just leave the people to be, and then these things just flare up again, like we saw with ISIS. We saw that vacuum of power after Saddam Hussein was out of Iraq. We put him there. So, what are we planning on doing? What do we want? And I don't think that there has been a very well articulated political position that's been agreed on by the most powerful nations on earth. And whether that be the Five Eyes or you can send that even out to the 14 Eyes, I don't think there has been a very well articulated position that this is what we stand for, this is what we believe should happen, and this is what we're prepared to back, both financially and militarily.
Well, it is becoming increasingly clear that the problems of internal Ukrainian corruption and the Russian invasion of Ukraine are problems that will have to be solved sequentially and not simultaneously. First, the Russian invasion of Ukraine must be defeated, neutralized, and the Russians compelled to accept an armistice which is acceptable to both Ukraine and the West, and deal with that problem. And then you deal with once Ukraine begins its going through the admission process to the European Union as well as to NATO, then you simultaneously with those processes, you help them deal with the corruption issue.
John,
Go ahead.
I don't think they'll get membership to the European Union. I think that will be vetoed by one of the 27 members. I can't see them getting full EU membership. But also, whatever we agree on in relation to Ukraine that Ukrainians can live with, we can't ignore that there has to be some sort of compromise reached with Russia. If Russia doesn't accept it, then this is likely to flare up again. So we have to try to, I don't know whether it's diplomatically or what, but we're going to have to make sure that the Russians can concede or be happy with, in some way, happy with what's being proposed. Otherwise, I can't see this ending.
I think, Jonathan, there is one important issue, speaking about corruption, and as you suggest, let's first get rid of Russians, and then we'll work on the corruption issue. And I agree that the extendance to European Union and NATO, or even one of those, will help to clear up a lot of issues about corruption. I remember I used to have business in Poland, and I remember when Poland was getting into European Union and NATO, but so much more to European Union. There were so many changes required for not just Poland as a country, but for every enterprise in Poland that has to go through certain steps of verification of its financial reporting, its technical adherence to the standards of the European Union. There are so many things in Poland which was, at that time, it wasn't so much more developed than Ukraine, but the people's desire to join European Union was incredible. And thankfully, European Union was financing a lot of these changes that had to be made on almost every enterprise. It's costly. And European Union was providing the loans and the financial guarantees and so on and on. The same can happen with Ukraine. What I'm trying to say is that there is a certain process of regardless of extendance to NATO and European Union, there is a process of rebuilding the Ukraine. There was no process of rebuilding Poland because nobody destroyed Poland at that time. But today, there will be a problem of rebuilding Ukraine. And you can only imagine how many billions of dollars would be required, hundreds of millions of billions of dollars. And if you don't have mechanism how to regulate the proper use of these funds, it's very difficult. That's why, in my opinion, I think there is also political, of course, reason too, because of the ascendance of Republican possibility to win the political battle against Democrats in next year election. So there are several reasons that United States now started to put accents, but it's not really that all of a sudden started now. No, it started several months ago. I would say most likely 9, but for sure 6 months ago. When I remember there was in Ramstein when Zelensky visited, and some U.S. officials asked him about how the reforms are going. He said, "Oh yeah, that's fine. We're working on it. We need money. We need weapons." A month later, same answer. "Oh, we are working on it. Don't worry. We need money. We need weapons." At 3 months later, when Zelensky said the same thing, people got almost radicalized and asked him, "You said that a month ago and 2 months ago. What have you done lately?" So he was confronted really on one of the Ramstein's meetings. And finally, his last trip to US was completely unsuccessful. He was not able to have many meetings that he planned to do. And the most, just a few days ago, there was a delegation headed by same Yermak, who hardly can speak any English. And he was there. I don't know why he was there, but this is tremendous disadvantage to all Ukrainian diplomacy to send someone who doesn't even have official position with Ukrainian government and who can hardly speak English to send to United States. What is it for? What do you think, John?
It's not that's not an easy problem.
It's not. That's why I'm thinking that Zelensky has to realize by now that, okay, so you can skip election next year because Ukraine is fighting. That's okay. But with this, things are getting more and more, and people learn about these things. You cannot hide it. Okay, you could hide it for a month, for 3 months, 6 months. You cannot hide it forever. So it's coming more and more of an issue. So you cannot ignore it anymore.
Well, what is becoming increasingly clear is that this Ukrainian war situation and its potential aftermath is going to call for not, obviously there is no perfect solution. It's not, or you have to look for a reasonably imperfect solution.
Yeah, exactly.
The best one you can get. And that is going to be a very difficult thing to. I mean, it's going to be a situation which resolves itself much like the situation resolved itself between North Korea and South Korea, where we have divided Koreas, for decades. And so now you may if we are going to avoid that situation with Ukraine and Russia, it is going to call for some political resolution and unity on the part of the U.S. and its NATO allies. They are going to have to come to this realization, and that it is not going to be a situation where they have to deal with this with Ukraine and Russia not as the situation is, not as they would wish it to be. You're not going to have that perfectly attainable solution. So we will have to work our way carefully, but looking for, again, the central goal is armistice, ceasefire, end of conflict, but also armistice on a sustainable basis, one which does not reward Russia in any way for having undertaken the war to begin with. If you do not have, any solution that does not involve the attainment of those goals simply calls for military conflict simply being kicked down the road to a future date.
John, what's interesting is that I totally agree with you. And here, when we have, at least on the battlefield, there is about parity. There is equality in Russian, what they can do, and Ukrainians, what they can do in near future. Okay, and there is a quite clear way out of it, which you just offered. Now, in situation in Israel, there is one side probably 100 times stronger than the other side. And to fight and to find a solution acceptable to all is way much more difficult than in the case of Russia and Ukraine. Isn't it a paradox in a way?
In a sense, yes, because even though they're 100 times stronger, the Israel politically is confronted with a difficult solution of you have a small state, which a small quasi, almost shall we say, failed state, but yet they desire your destruction. And so if they insist on desiring your eventual destruction, well, the only logical response that you have, as brutal as it is okay, we shall eliminate you, and then take care of the problem that way. And that sounds very reminiscent of what Stonewall Jackson during the Civil War said after one of these battles, and his men asks General Jackson, "What are we going to do about this, General?" And Stonewall Jackson's reply was, "Kill them all." I mean, it may come to that, but as brutal as that realization is, but it is a realization which even Israel itself is reluctant to come to. That in order to preserve itself, it must impose a Carthaginian peace upon its opponent, even though it's much weaker and it still desires its total destruction. All right, then, have it your way. We shall eliminate the problem by eliminating you.
Do you remember the movie Independence Day, when the U.S. president comes and there's this creature behind the glass wall, and the American president asks, "What is it exactly you want?" And the creature responds, "To kill ya."
Well,
That's the situation. Yeah, sometimes a good old killing solves a lot of problems, apparently. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for today's program, and also to our contributors, Nick and Shaquille. And I'm looking forward to see you on Friday, same place, same time, and hopefully we'll have some good news both in Ukraine and Israel.
looking forward to it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.